Hello, welcome to the View from Row Z. We've got an interesting one this week, a bit of a special because it's a midweek game that we're reviewing. So it's Arsenal hosting Manchester City in probably the biggest game that the Emirates has seen, except for maybe the Champions League semi-final a while ago now. Jason, what was your initial reaction to the game? A few highlights and a few lowlights.
Yeah, I think I've got to be careful as obviously as an Arsenal supporter, but thanks for the introduction there. So from a league perspective, arguably Arsenal's biggest game in arguably 19 years or so, on the basis that 2004 was the last win, and they had the opportunity to go 6 points clear with the game in hand. And I think if they'd done that, they'd be odds on then to win the title. So yeah, a 3-1 defeat means that essentially we're looking at level, but with a game in hand. But you would feel that, I feel that with Man City, we needed to stay ahead of them because we know they could just be relentless and just keep on churning out wins, rotate the team to a reasonable extent, keep churning out the wins, whereas Arsenal are not at that point. And if you compare man to man, and no disrespect to the players, see Man City are a superior team. If you look at the age profile and experience of that team, and then compare it to what is either the first or second youngest team in the league, you would expect Man City to come through in that sort of game. And on my Super 6 prediction, I went 2-1 for Man City. I'm not sure I neg on my team, so I absolutely wanted us to win. But it's not surprising that what happened. A little bit disappointing, of course, because it was the opportunity there, and the fact we got ourselves in that position to potentially be 6 clear of the game in hand is amazing. And it's still in our hands. From a neutral perspective, it's great because if Arsenal win all their matches, they win the league. If Man City win all their matches, they win the league. It's actually in both teams' own hands at the moment. It's quite an unusual situation. So it's fascinating. My analysis would be first half Arsenal were the better team, and second half Man City adjusted their tactics. And I think the key thing was essentially it came down to individuals, and there were probably 3 individuals that decided this match. Individual number 1 was Eddie Nketiah. He missed 2 very good and 1 serviceable chance, so he could have had on another day 3 goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think the header in the first half. There was a header in the second half, wasn't there? Yeah, I think there was 3 chances. As you're saying, I think if that's Gabriel Jesus, at least 1 goes in, probably 2, and then you're thinking, well, that's 3-3.
Jesus scored 5 goals. Yes, he's made loads of assists and brought a lot to the team. Nketiah scored more goals than him, but Nketiah isn't one that is reliable consistently in matches against the top 6. I mean, yes, he's well against Man United recently, but that was his kind of poacher instinct, right place at the right time, which normally serves him well. It didn't here. And, you've got Nketiah versus Haaland. I mean, if you had Haaland in that Arsenal team, always Hearts on the end of their chances, Arsenal win that match. It's fairly straightforward. So, yes, we sort of had it. It was 1-1 with 20 minutes to go. So, obviously, would have taken 1-1. It's not necessarily surprising. We don't expect to be better than Man City because we're not. We're on that journey, but we've got ourselves in a really good position. So I think Nketiah. So Gabriel's a second individual. What's your view on Gabriel?
Gabriel struggled. I mean, I don't think many centre backs, professional or amateur, would want to line up against Haaland on any night, but I think it was particularly bruising. And yeah, Gabriel really struggled. The penalty he got away with Haaland being just offside with VAR. Some of the sort of passes from the back were a little bit shaky as well. The communication maybe with Tomiyasu could have been a factor. I don't know in the opening goal. He struggled. He struggled massively, and losing the protection of Partey in front. That undoubtedly is a factor too.
I don't blame that though. I think Jorginho actually had a pretty decent game, and if you look at the stats for him, at least it reads quite well. He did get in the right place in the right time in quite a few defensive situations. For me, Gabriel was a problem. Now he's done pretty well. There are people recently saying he's better than Saliba because he cut those errors out of his game in the last sort of 5 to 10 matches. But it always bubbles up. But if you look at what he's done in the last 14 months, he's been consistent. He's been fit and he's played well. But in big matches, including Man City at home twice in a row.
Yeah.
Last time he got sent off twice quickly. He got a yellow card, then went steaming in and got sent off. This time, he made that error for the penalty. He got away with it. But if you watch his reaction afterwards, he starts like geeing up the crowd, throwing his arms up, like getting pumped. He got really, really emotional. And he gets too emotional in these big matches. And then he made error for the, I think it was the second goal, if memory serves. No, second goal or third goal? I can't remember which one it was.
Third, I think it was. Second was Grealish putting in, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it possibly third. But then also, if you look at some other matches here, against Fulham at home, when we barely beat them 2-1, he gave Mitrovic the ball, he's dallying with it, gave him the ball right in the penalty box. I think against Tottenham at home, he gave away a penalty, and there's several other matches against the sort of the big teams, inverted commas, where he has made individual errors more than anyone that lead to goal. And I'm not saying people shouldn't make errors, but it's a consistent thing with him. He gets too emotional. So,
yeah, I think it's also Arsenal want to make that trying to make that next step, get back into the Champions League, re-establish themselves, and keep themselves there, challenge for the Premier League. And I think the medium-term question there is Gabriel at a sufficient level to achieve that season after season? And I think the answer is probably a no. Great as part of a squad, useful backup, but I think if you want to be taking that next step and competing year in year out with Manchester City's, with Madrid's in the Champions League, I think that's the sort of player and the sort of outcomes that need to be cut out of the game. So I think improvement there for maybe Mikel Arteta to look at.
Yeah, they got Kirill in the January transfer window, 22-year-old left-sided Polish international centre-back. So he will be challenging him soon for that position. But I think we can't go and buy it. If you look at Man City, they got Laporte, they got Akanji, got Ake.
Yeah.
All of those, I don't know about Akanji, I've not really seen him that much, but you could argue 3 of those are better than Gabriel. And we can't go and buy a player like that. So we have to buy them younger and watch them build them up, like we've done with sort of Ben White, like we've done with some of the academy players as well. So it's an interesting one. But the third person that changes the match, obviously, is Haaland in terms of what he did, the clever thing. I think when we were doing the watch along together, I think I mentioned it, but correct me if I'm wrong, because he was basically playing against Saliba in the first half and didn't get too much out of him. And Saliba was very calm. When he shepherded the ball out a few times instead of doing a dodgy pass back, you could just see the calmness there. And even if he wasn't calm inside, he exudes calmness, so people don't think something's about to happen. Whereas, Haaland then switched in the second half and he stood on Gabriel and challenged him a lot more. And then he got a lot more joy out of that.
Yeah.
Certainly led to led to some of those goals. So, overall, it's still an open race. It's in both teams' hands. So Man City are definitely the favourites. And I think it's absolutely key now what happens with Arsenal when they go to Aston Villa this coming weekend. Another 12:30 kickoffs. They don't tend to do very well in those 12:30 kickoffs. I hate them. We always seem to struggle on the 12:30s. And it's a tricky match. Emery's obviously tactically very, very astute. And it's absolutely key to just not lose that match, because they played well against Man City for certainly the first half, and not so much most of the second half, but certainly if the game finished 1-1, you wouldn't be saying it was an undeserved 1-1, because certainly Arsenal had quite a few chances and Nketiah just wasn't able to take 3 of them. And then there's a couple of places where they kind of hesitated. Xhaka hesitated, for example, when he's able to play people through, because that's not his sort of natural positioning. So if we got on and drawn that match, City had 3 good chances and they took them all. And again, as with the home game against them a year before, we were arguably better than them between the boxes, but in the boxes, I think Arteta called it outright in his post-match interview, or certainly his pre-match one for this weekend. They were far superior to us in the boxes, and that is what decided the game, i.e. Haaland and Kessie. If you swap those two rounds, then Arsenal would have won. Obviously, we can't swap them round, but that's what it comes down to. So, yeah, what's going to happen next year, of course, is my man Balogun is going to come back, and he's setting the French league on fire. So we might have that kind of like guy that can, I'm not saying he's as good as Haaland, obviously not, but someone that's got a lot of goals under their belt. He could come in and offer that sort of more clinical option, possibly.
Do you think he dislodges Nketiah from that second spot?
Probably, or probably. But it's hard to say because I've not seen him play in this team, and I don't know what his link-up plays like. Because he might be more of a centre forward, Haaland type centre forward, rather than Nketiah. Sort of was a poacher. Then he came back into the team when Jesus played really well, as Jesus does, for the dropping back part and the pressing. But what he doesn't do as well as Jesus, which is why he scores more goals, because he's in the centre. He doesn't drift out to the wings and give overloads on the wings, which helps Martinelli in particular. So it looks like Arsenal are struggling to score goals at the moment and create lots of good chances sometimes, certainly against Burnley and against Everton, because there isn't quite enough. It's a bit more predictable up front. So you just need to have a think about that. Maybe bring in Trossard. I'd actually perhaps bring in Trossard for Nketiah and maybe put the Trossard as a false nine, or put Martinelli in the middle and Trossard on the left. That might be quite interesting.
Well, that was probably my next question for you. Martinelli's sort of gone off the boil a little bit last 5 or 6 games, perhaps.
Yeah, it's because the teams, the way they've been playing against Arsenal, and not a criticism, by the way, more low blocks in most of those games. And what he does is he's very good at running into space, running round people, running at people. If you take that away from him, because he's quicker than pretty much anyone, and he's got quicker feet than pretty much anyone. So if you nullify that, as Everton did in that match, when they did 2-on-1 on him, and then went to Saka on the other side, they did 2-on-1 on him. If you do that, then he doesn't really offer much, where Saka's got a bit more of a sort of a better crossing and passing range than Martinelli. So Martinelli, if you get rid of the speed element and you double up on him, okay, that might give you a tactical weakness elsewhere, but it removes his advantages. So then at that point, is he the best man for that position? Do you put him in the middle? I don't know, just thinking out loud.
I think the whole thing is quite interesting. Arsenal City level on points at the minute. Arsenal with a game in hand, but I think both teams could see that as, I think Mikel Arteta said, "Oh well, we've got a game in hand, so we're essentially top." Which get a point out of that game in hand. Yeah, you are. But then City, conversely, can look at it and go, "Well, we've still got to play that other game." So we can almost dismiss, if we think we can beat Arsenal, we can dismiss that game in hand. So yeah, it's finely poised. And yeah, Arsenal, incredible season to date. Who would have thought halfway through the season, 50 points? I think you certainly would have. Would you, Jason?
No, I mean, I think the thing is we really need Smith Rowe and Jesus back. We just need that. They've got something different, a bit more freshness. So Jesus up front, he raised that level in the first part of the season, set the bar, and it makes our attack play better. And Smith Rowe is much better than anyone else in the team at picking up the ball in tight spaces, running, shifting people around. And he's had that groin surgery, which he's been carrying that injury for years, apparently. And to miss him, and he got double figures goals, I think, last year, or something like 9, 10, 11 goals. He's been a massive miss. I think he's a sort of player when we're playing the more defensive teams against us that could unlock that. So when he comes back, and I think he might be on the bench this coming weekend, potentially. I think
that'd be good.
Would be brilliant.
A little bit of guile there. We need some players like that sometimes. And I mean, last season, I seem to remember that he used to swap in for Gabriel Martinelli.
He did.
Yeah. Is that likely to happen again? Would he be taken over from Martinelli, or is likely to play them together now?
He might play together because the Xhaka position, where it was clear against Man City, Xhaka got into that forward position a few times, but lacked the confidence or the assertiveness to make that final good ball. And he's tried Fabio Vieira. He brought him on for Xhaka a few times. Fabio Vieira has been very disappointing so far, but he's not had a good run, I suppose. You could put Smith Rowe in that position. Not sure defensively whether that would quite work, but if you need a goal, he could. Someone that goes out to the left, someone that runs forward, he could do very well. But we're probably coming to the end of this podcast episode.
Yeah, good. Some good discussion points. Obviously, a massive result in the Premier League for this season, and it sets us up nicely for the run-in, if you can call it that.
Definitely. So thanks everyone for listening, and we look forward to catching you on the next one.
See you soon.